Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to day 8 of the holiday card series for 2019. Today's card is really fun because I'm going to start out with some plaid pattern created with watercolors. So I'm going to show you how to do that really simply. And then I'm going to get into some layered stamping with die cutting and also some kind of arranging using some W+9 stamps. This stamp set is gorgeous and it has the most beautiful like brush letter calligraphy greetings, which I didn't even use. I think I'm going to have to save it for a card later on or later this season because I absolutely love these greetings. So let's get into it. The stamp set I'm using today is from W+9 and it's called Winter Greenery. It has these fun images that you can layer up with different colors of ink to create more dimensional images. So I'm going to use the leaves and the pine needles and the berries. I'm going to start out by watercoloring that plaid background. So I'm taping my watercolor paper to a board. I'm using some Fabriano Artistico Extra White. And the watercolor paints I'm using are Magella Mission Gold. I've taken some of the black and it wasn't watering down enough with just water from a paintbrush. So I ended up using some water from a jar that has an eyedropper and I added a lot of water. I wanted to really dilute this down so it was a very, very pale gray. And I did test that on some scratch watercolor paper just to make sure that even after it was dry, that it wasn't too dark or too light. And this was just about perfect for what I had in mind. So I went ahead and started to paint. I'm using a 1-inch wide flat brush. This is a Zen brush from Royal and Langnickel. And I'm just doing a single stripe right across the bottom of this watercolor paper. I'm going to come up a little bit away, maybe about an inch away, maybe a little more, and do another stripe. I'm going to do a third stripe going this direction, and the spacing's not perfect, but that's totally okay. I will end up die cutting a smaller piece for my card. Used my heat tool to speed along the drying process, but you could definitely let this air dry if you prefer. And then I rotated it 90 degrees and started to paint the stripes in the other direction. I'm doing the same stripe that I did before, that same wide stripe right across. And then I'm going to go up a little bit and do another stripe right above. I love how where it intersects with the previous line that it just darkens up. This is a really easy way to make a buffalo plaid. And you could leave it just like this with those two directions of a very simple wide stripe. You could definitely leave it like that. But I wanted to add a little bit more detail to this. So I watered down my gray even more. So it's super, super pale. And I've swapped out my brush for a 1/2-inch flat brush instead of the 1-inch. So it's more narrow, and I'm going in and adding an additional stripe in that wide white area. I did that in both directions, and then that leaves me with some wider intersecting areas and some smaller intersecting areas. I'm now going to take a Pilot silver marker and add some stripes in the widest gray stripes. Just going to put down a little tiny pinstripe. This is going to add just a little bit of detail onto this plaid background and give it a little bit of sheen and sparkle since this is a silver paint pen. After all of that was complete, I removed it from my board by peeling up the blue painter's tape. I'm now using Jelly Bean Green ink from Gina K Designs, and I'm going to stamp the main solid image of these leaves. Now, you're only going to see the stamping done just once for each of these leaves, but I did end up stamping it twice so that I would have additional leaves to work with once I assembled my card. So I stamped that first time in Jelly Bean Green, and it was a little splotchy, and I know this ink does dry back very smooth, but I wanted to make sure I had a really solid image, so I stamped it an additional time. I then took the detailed image and I lined it up. And there's plenty of spots to help you line up the image right on top of the previously stamped. And I'm using fresh asparagus ink. This is a nice green ink that's going to have some contrast with the previous ink that I've stamped. When I first stamped this, I thought, oh no, it's really dark. This doesn't look quite right to me. but I'm glad I just went with it because, like I mentioned before, this type of ink dries back. And not only does it get more solid, but it also fades just a tiny bit. So you can already see right there as I'm stamping the berries that the greens had already dried back quite a bit. I used some lipstick ink for the first red color, and now I'm using cherry red to add more detail. And then I used fresh asparagus ink to stamp these little pine needles or these little twigs. So since I have my Misty, I'm going to finish off my stamping. I'm using the Seasonal Greeting stamp set from Gina K Designs, as well as some cherry red. Actually, I don't think this is cherry red. This is actually Schoolhouse Red cardstock from Simon Says Stamp. I prepped the area with an anti-static pattern tool, and I did cut this stamp apart so that I could stamp the words separately on 2 different lines. I'm using some Versamark ink, inking up those stamps, and then swinging the door of my Misty over and stamping down onto that red cardstock. I'm going to coat the stamping in some sterling embossing powder from Burtis Monroe. This is a nice silver shade. I thought it would go well with the silver paint pen that I added as a pinstripe on the plaid pattern. Then use my scissors and trim these down so they're narrow strips, and I'll set these aside until I'm ready to assemble my card. Now I'm going to do a bunch of die cutting. I'm using the A7 layers dies from Waffle Flower to cut out a plaid background for my card. This is going to be an A7 card, and I thought it'd be kind of fun to have the plaid at a diagonal. So I ran that through my Gemini Junior machine just to make sure I have a really good cut. And then I was able to disassemble my die cutting sandwich, and I'm left with my plaid background. I'm going to do a bunch of other die cutting. I'm going to cut out the berries as well as the smaller leaf shape and also the little sprig of pine needles. Now, I did want to mention that the die set that comes with the stamp set or that is coordinating with the stamp set does not include the smaller pine needle sprig or the larger leaves. I think that's because it's intended that you can stamp the larger leaves and then pop up the smaller leaves on top. But for my card design and what I had in mind, I need to have the larger leaves cut out as well. So I did do that with a bit of fussy cutting with an X-Acto knife and also some scissors. It was a bit time consuming, but it wasn't too difficult because it was pretty straightforward how to cut these apart. So I didn't end up using the larger of the smaller of the sprigs of pine needles. I just set those aside. I then created a 5x7 card base using some Neenah Classic Crest Solo Right cardstock in the 110-pound version. I adhered my watercolor background onto my card front using some foam tape, and then added these very narrow foam strips from Darice, which I trimmed down so they were smaller, put them behind all the different leaves, and then started assembling my card design. Now, for the second sprig of leaves that I had, I ended up trimming it down so that it was just 2 little leaves and added it on to the top of that leaf shape I already had down. So I put some foam adhesive on the back and then just added that on so it extended the leaves. I then put some glue right behind the pine needles, and I used my tweezers to help hold this piece so I could slide it underneath the leaves that are already there. This is just going to fill out that area right in that center area of the card. Now everything's starting to shape up and I'm getting a nice grouping on my card. I'm going to add the berries next so that I have an idea of where those will be placed. And I just used some Gina K Connect glue for that. And then I added my sentiment that says Winter Wishes. I just put that on some foam tape. And then I decided I wanted even more leaves. So I put some glue behind the smaller leaf shape and nestled that in right near the top of my card. I'm going to add a few little details onto this card just to give it a little bit of sparkle and shine. I'm using a sparkle pen from Spectrum Noir. This puts out just a little bit of shimmer right on top of these berries. And then I took some crystal glaze from Nouveau and I added that over just the berries. So you'll be able to see in the final picture of the final photo of this card how well this kind of glossy surface ended up on top of these berries. The last thing I did was I took one of those leaves that I cut off earlier and just glued it down to the very bottom.
just to finish off that area. And that finishes the card for today. I love how this turned out. I love the arrangement of all of those leaves.
I love how that really soft gray plaid just kind of softly sits in the background with those leaves and berries on top. I think it turned out really, really pretty. It's one of those kind of more classic, elegant type of cards. I think it looks really, really fun. So for today's question down in the comments, I want you guys to tell me about your Christmas Eve traditions, or if you have Christmas Eve traditions. Our tradition growing up was we would go down to my grandma's house, my mom's parents, and we would have a big family dinner and we would open presents. And when we were really, really little, my grandmother would make all of the grandkids pajamas. One year she made pajamas that matched all of our Cabbage Patch dolls. It was adorable. If I find the picture, I'll put it in right here because this picture is adorable. We're all in our little pajamas. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I've got 3 more videos for you to check out. These are all day 8 videos from years past in the holiday card series. Like all my other videos this year, I've got every single year in the holiday card series listed down below, all day 8. And thank you so much for watching. I'll be back on Wednesday with day 9 in the holiday card series.